At some point in the last couple years, you guys have talked about, at length, I think, in small group, worldview. Do we remember that? The conversations about worldview? Someone tell me what a worldview is, define a worldview for me, and then I want some people to tell me how a worldview impacts your life. So start by somebody defining worldview for me. It doesn't have to be perfect, just take a stab at it. How would you define worldview? Okay. Now tell me different ways that worldview impacts your life. The way that you live your life. Okay, tell me ways worldview impacts your life. Thank you, JT. Decisions. Okay, break that down for me. Yeah, Ethan. You can add another one and then we'll break it down. Okay, your friends. Tell me how it impacts your friends. Okay, great. Now tell me more about, well, go ahead, Ellie. I'll let you. We'll come back to decisions maybe. Yeah, okay. Oh, okay, cool. So now tell me about how worldview impacts, like JT said, it's a good answer, but it's a very general answer, decisions. Tell me about how your worldview impacts decisions. Yeah, Clay. Yeah, definitely I would say worldview impacts your hobbies, for sure. I mean, I think the correct Sunday school answer would be like, well, Jesus, yeah, but kind of everything, right? Our worldview impacts every part of our life. Time management for sure. Anything else? Yeah. Jobs, what job we take, definitely. That's good. Okay, so every person here has a worldview. How do you think that worldviews are established? How do we get a worldview? Any worldview, how is it impacted? What things like pour into a worldview? Definitely. Like what our parents are teaching us, what teachers are teaching us. Daniel. Definitely experience, yep. Yeah, what we put into our minds, definitely. That's good. Okay, so the reality is that we all have a source, okay? There are multiple sources of authority in our lives that impact our worldview. Because, like, it would be easy to say that we're supposed to have a strictly biblical worldview. That, like, the Bible is the only thing that's supposed to influence the way that we see life, right? In an ideal world, that would be true, but it's not. There are other things that play into our lives. There are other sources and authorities in our lives that impact the way that we see life. They impact the way that we think, the way that we act, the way that we live. And if this is true, it means that our worldview is really important. If it's going to impact the way that we act, see, and live, then it's really important what our worldview is so that we can approach these different facets of life with a worldview that's going to point us in the right direction. And how we get our worldview comes back to an issue of authority. Who do we follow? So last week we spent time talking about 3 fork-in-the-road decisions. Does anybody remember what the first one is? Andrew? No. Well, we did talk about that, but we talked about fork-in-the-road conversations in Matthew. 3 examples. No. Yes. Narrow road, narrow gate, wide gate. Which God to serve? The good and the bad tree. The good and the bad tree, with good fruit and bad fruit. Those were the 3 different fork-in-the-road conversations that we had. Tonight, we're going to talk about 2 more fork-in-the-road decisions that we have to make. Thank you, James. There's more water if you guys need it. We're going to talk about the solid rock of wisdom and the shifting sands of foolishness. and we're going to talk about the teachings of the master and the teachings of men. And so to be able to clearly see and choose between these different opinions or options requires wisdom. So we're going to talk a lot about wisdom tonight. And wisdom is being able to see life from God's perspective and act accordingly to that perspective, right? That would be another way I would define worldview, is to be able to see the world with God's perspective and then be able to act accordingly to that perspective. Right? We see it as God sees it, and we act that way. You could say that having wisdom is adopting God's worldview. And that's what the Sermon on the Mount as a whole, over the last, I think, when I did the math, we spent 14 weeks in chapters 5 through 7. Okay? The rest of Matthew, we will go much faster. We'll take chapter chunks moving forward. But this Sermon on the Mount is like the greatest sermon anybody's ever preached. It's the greatest lesson anybody's ever taught. And so we had to spend a lot of time talking about it. And if you look at the whole Sermon on the Mount, I would encourage you, we're going to have a long break here, read Matthew through, and spend time, make sure to read Matthew 5 through 7 in one break, because what it tells you is it's all about living and having God's worldview. That's what the Sermon on the Mount is how do we live a life with God's worldview. So, somebody read Matthew 7:24 through 27 for me. Good self-discipline. Thank you. Okay, so our first point is strong foundation. Jesus is the master teacher, the greatest teacher to ever teach. And one of the many strategies that Jesus puts into place is he would tell easy to remember stories that contained profound truth. Okay, so to give you like a very practical reference to this, one of the most difficult things for me in preaching and teaching is to illustrate this way. Right? Pastor Jeff does a really good job of application and illustration. But on a Sunday morning, when he preaches and when I preach is very different, right? Mine is like we're in a class and I'm just walking through and teaching you what it's saying. He does such a good job of applying what we're learning, illustrating what we're learning, giving us tangible, real life ways to apply it to our life. I don't do it as well, right? Jesus was masterful at this. He would tell easy to remember stories that contained profound truth. One of the stories he tells is that there are two men and they're both building houses, and those houses are both very similar to each other, but there's a key difference. One is wisely building his home on a foundation of rock. It is solid, it's not moving, right? The other is foolishly building his home on sand. What does sand do when you walk in it? It moves, it shifts, it goes back and forth, right? You dig a hole at the beach, it gets full of sand again, right? Sand is constantly moving, so that means that his foundation is constantly moving. And the results of building on these different foundations is significant. The man who builds his house on rock, it stays, it's solid. The man who builds his house in the sand, it falls apart, it's destroyed. So what Jesus is communicating is that it matters where we build our house. It matters where we find our foundation. So the first thing that we need to learn is that we need to know the Word and obey the Word. And as a result of doing those two things, knowing the Word and obeying the Word, we will be wise. Jesus intends for this story of these two men to apply to everyone and for everyone who hears his words. Jesus is going to start off by noting the qualities of the wise man. First, the wise man hears the words of Christ. And second, the wise man acts upon those words. He does those words. The wise man hears and does. I jumped the gun a little bit, but the next one will come on, I promise. The wise man, two qualities: hears the word of Christ and then acts upon those words. He does what those words tell him to do. And so to be the person who hears God's words and then obeys them is to be wise, like the wise home builder. And to be the one who obeys the word and doesn't do it is to be like the foolish man who builds his word or his home on sand. Hear the word, obey the word, be wise. But there's a contrast. If you know the word and disobey the word, then you're counted as foolish. This is the last one on this slide. At first glance, there doesn't seem to be any significant differences between the men. They both hear the sermon of Jesus. They both hear his words. They both go and build a house. They build similar houses in similar locations, but their foundation is different. Their obedience to the word is different. And verse 26 tells us that the foolish man hears the words but doesn't act on those words. He is the person that hears the gospel message week after week after week after week and doesn't respond to it, doesn't come to the Lord, but instead continues to go on their own. Reading the word, knowing the word, reciting the word, memorizing the word, they don't mean anything if you're not being obedient to the word. Obedience is the narrow road. Obedience is the good fruit and good tree. Obedience is the genuine profession. Obedience is what categorizes the genuine believer, right? You need to know the word, you need to hear the word, you need to obey the word. Your obedience is crucial in your walk with Christ. Who wants to read verses 28 and 29? Yes, Caleb. Thank you, Caleb. Read loud.
And when Jesus finished these things, the crowd were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes.
Thank you, Caleb. Okay, so just a little bit left. It's a short lesson tonight. It's our last week. I want you guys to be able to hang out, spend time. I have a big announcement at the end I need to make as well. So, this last point, okay? Listen to Jesus in verses 28 and 29. These last two verses give us information on how people responded to the teachings of Jesus. His sermon has come to an end, and now he waits for their obedience to his teaching. Matthew has given, in the book of Matthew, chapters 5 through 7, he's given us like a really short version of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, right? Have we heard of Cliff Notes? We heard of Spark Notes, right? These sites that you can go to when there's a really big book that you were supposed to read for school and you didn't read it, and there's a paper due tomorrow.
It's like if you went to AI and you were like, give me a summary of the sermon.
Yes, thank you. It's like if you went to AI and were like, hey, give me just a real quick little blurb, right? So that's what Matthew's giving us. Like the reality is, I don't know if you guys know this, I broke a memorial record last week on Sunday morning. I'm going to tell you, Maxon. Good night, dog. I preached for an hour and 8 minutes. It's very long. Thank you. Thank you. My rough draft was an hour and 40 minutes. So, just kidding. I didn't have a rough draft. No, it didn't feel that long. I can't believe people weren't like, come on. But it was long, right? So, Jesus' sermon was likely very long. But the difference is that it was probably way easier to listen to him teach than it is to listen to me teach. So it probably felt quick. Matthew gives us, that's not nice, JT. Matthew gives us a very quick, like Spark Notes AI version of what the Sermon on the Mount is, right? It's just a summary. It was a very long teaching session. And verse 28 simply tells us that when he comes to the end of it, what's it say here? Nope, that's wrong. It says, and when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished by his teaching. They were shocked. They were caught off guard. It can be translated, astonished, as amazed. They were in awe of his teaching. And this is an imperfect verb that they're using here, that Matthew uses. And what that means is that there's tone behind it. Like the emotion is that their wonder continued. Like it didn't end and they weren't like, whoa. Okay, so what are we going to eat? Like their wonder followed them. Right? Like as they left the Sermon on the Mount, they remained astonished. Like it stuck with them. It remained with them. They thought about it for a long time. Maybe it changed the way that they were living. As they got up and went home, they stayed amazed actively by his words. And the source of their amazement was Jesus' teachings, the things that he's saying to him. And the focus in verse 28 of that astonishment is the content of what Jesus is saying. Because verse 29 then focuses on the delivery. They were shocked by his words. They were stunned by the things that he was saying and the authority that he was saying it with. Go back to verse 29, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. Okay? When I was in a preaching class in college, one of the rules was, as you get up in front of, we had to practice, right? We had to write, I think I had 2 preaching classes and I wrote in total 6 sermons, okay? And one of them was it was a very early one. It was on the 10 plagues. And I just thought of this illustration, so I'm not prepped for it. But I wish I had, because my thesis of the sermon, what I was trying to persuade people of, that there were actually 11 plagues and not just 10. And one of those 11 plagues was obedience, right? This idea of disobedience was a plague to Egypt, right? And it's a good sermon, and I still maybe kind of think that. But the problem was that I started my sermon off, and then throughout it, saying the words, I think there were 11 plagues instead of 10, right? I went in, like one of my first times preaching, nervous, kind of making a statement to one of my favorite professors who did this thing that when he's listening, he's not mad, but he's like focusing, and he's like looking at you dirty, like you're saying something real bad. But he's just thinking hard, right? So I'm like, I think there were 11 plagues and not 10, right? So this idea of, I wasn't teaching with authority, right? There was no back to it. There was nothing that came behind it. But Christ, it tells us, he was teaching as one who had authority and not as their scribes, who are just the guys that come in like, well, the Pharisees say this. The priests think you should do this. Jesus was saying, I am the authority, and I'm teaching you as the one who gives authority. And so no man, John 7:46 tells us, this is why, man, you should read all of the gospel. I know that now I was like, read Matthew during the break, and read Matthew 5 through 7 at the same time, and now I'm kind of like, and also read all 4 gospels back to back to back to back, because they all give you different pieces of the puzzle, right? John 7:46 says, no man ever spoke like this. It was the first time any man, any teacher, got in front of a group of people and spoke with this sort of authority. So they were stunned. They were shocked. They were taken aback. They were astonished by what he was teaching. The teachings of Jesus stood in stark contrast to those of the religious leaders, right? We talked about this, if you think way back to chapter 6, we were talking about what is biblical divorce, right? We talked about the divorce part for a really little period of time, but we talked about these like rabbinic schools Jewish religious leaders were telling you, well, yeah, you can divorce her if one ear is bigger than the other, right? Or if she has some nose hair, you can divorce her, right? So they were teaching nonsense, but Jesus is teaching real words. These Pharisees and scribes were teaching under a false authority, but Jesus' words held a different authority. There was a different backing to them. There was a different sting to the words that he was saying. There was a presence in Jesus where his authority resided in himself, in his person, right? As you think about great leaders, one of the reasons that they're great leaders is because they do just have authority, right? There's something that makes you want to follow them and makes following them easy. Jesus had authority within himself. It resided in his person. He offered and completed his own authority to these people. It wasn't the name of what school he went to or what church he was a part of. It didn't matter if it was a small church or a giant church. It was Jesus, and he was teaching with his authority. His words held weight behind them. We know that today, that they had been told, but they didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. Right? We know where Jesus' authority comes from. It is not a shock to me to read John 7:46 and to see that no man had ever taught like that. Of course, no man had ever taught like that. This is Jesus. I know the authority that Jesus holds because I have the entire Bible to tell me what his authority is and where it comes from. They didn't have that context. Jesus is the Son of God, and that means that he carries ultimate authority over all things that he came in contact with. His words were the literal words of God. And as he preached to them, his authority was divine. His words were the words of God to men directly, personally, and physically there. And so that concludes the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus gives us a breakdown of what it looks like to live life with God's worldview. How do you view the world, right? We talked really early about how the Sermon on the Mount is not this list of ways to come to know Christ. That's not what it is. It's not an evangelical sermon. This is how you know the Lord. This is a practical sermon that he preached. If you are a believer, this is what your life is going to look like. This is how you're going to view the world. This is how you're going to treat people. This is how you're going to act. This is how you're going to live. And this last two passages, verses 23 through 20, or 13 through 29, they give us 5 examples. And all those examples are different so that we can understand them differently, but ultimately all 5 are the exact same. And we learn that it comes down to one thing. Our whole worldview comes down to one thing, and it's being obedient to the Word of God. Knowing it, hearing it, and then doing it. That's what the Sermon on the Mount is. And the Sermon on the Mount, what it does is it prepares us. It gives us the theme of how we're then to go act throughout the book of Matthew. Somebody tell me how the book of Matthew ends. What do we run into? Yeah. Yeah, you can say it. The Great Commission, right? Somebody tell me, you don't have to recite it. You might not have it memorized. Tell me the gist. Yeah, okay, read it. Thank you.
Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.
Okay, so Matthew ends with Jesus telling us exactly what we're supposed to do. The Sermon on the Mount sets us up for it. It says this is what God's worldview is. Be obedient to his worldview, to his word. What does it mean to be obedient? Okay, it is everyday decisions. It is big life decisions. But ultimately, Matthew 28 tells us exactly what it means for us to act and live with a biblical worldview. We are supposed to go. And that's what Matthew will tell us all the way through his gospel. This theme is tracked from here, chapters 1 through 7, all the way through chapter 28. Know his word, hear his word, do his word. That is what we are supposed to do. Be obedient to his word. Okay, that's the Sermon on the Mount. Good job. You guys are 23 weeks deep into Matthew. So congratulations. Huh? It might be. It might be I bet Pastor did some long sermon series. I bet Pastor's the one that's like, we're going to do 6 years in the book of Psalms. I feel like is something that he would have done. So, we will do Matthew again starting in the fall. I don't want to tell you how much longer we'll be there. It will be, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. It won't be 3 years.
Is it going to be more than a year?
We're halfway done. We're halfway done, basically. Yeah, one more year probably, but not a full year. I think we'll finish before the end of the year. Yeah, we'll finish probably mid-April would be my guess. If no hiccups come. No, you guys can handle it. The reason I wanted to keep it a little bit of a secret is because I feel like in Ephesians, we knew how long we had. And when we were approaching the end, everybody was like, I'm so ready to be done. But you guys seem pretty engaged with Matthew still. So we're doing good. We're a little more than halfway done. And the rest of it goes a lot faster. So I feel like once we got to the end of the Sermon on the Mount, felt like we've been saying the same things for like 3 weeks in a row. That'll go away as we move through the book faster. Okay, so another announcement for you before we break, just to hang out some and you go get your character cards from Carolyn. Over the last month or so, I've been just considering and maybe researching, reaching out to other churches and youth ministries, chatting with your parents, trying to figure out how we move forward. And what I decided and what we decided is that we are going to expand the MSM calendar to add more dates to it, because I feel like we take May through August off and don't see each other at all, and I don't love that. And so we are going to start this summer, going to start meeting weekly on Sunday nights again, starting the first week of July. So we're going to add July and August to the MSM calendar. So what that will look like is regular hours here at the church, all of July, all of August, we will meet. So, of course, this one here will be a pool party at Josh and Bree, so that won't be here. The Scarberries.
Do you know the Awana leaders that visit my mom?
I would say, that's a good question, Clay. It will be up to seniors. Because this is the first year we're offering it, I would say that I'm cool with seniors attending, like graduating seniors, Ellie, Andrew, Lucas. If you want to come and be a part of it, you are welcome to come all the way through that pool party. And then starting on the 18th, we'll have, you step into adult ministries. But up to that point, if you are wanting to come, we would love to have you. Especially because we've never offered this before. So, that's kind of like the first half of the announcement. The second half of the announcement is I felt like starting in July and just jumping into the book of Matthew, like doing this exact thing, didn't make a lot of sense to me. But instead we want maybe those summer months because we all have more free time, like we can do things after, we could go a little later if we wanted to, those sorts of things. We wanted to do something that's better for really inviting your friends to come be a part of and coming to hang out. And as I talked to other churches, I talked to 15 churches and youth ministries, and 12 of them did something almost identical each summer. Okay, and what they would do is some sort of like team-based competition. There are squad wars, there are summer games, like all different kinds of things. So we're going to also do something along those lines. And we're going to call it, for the first 4 weeks of MSM in July, we are going to do the MSM games. So what we're going to do is divide the youth group into 4 teams. Okay, and those teams will stay the same all 4 weeks. And each team will be given kind of like the project or the goal to come up. We have a general, no questions right now, Max, and you can ask in a couple minutes. We will have a MSM games theme each year that will change. And your teams will be given the task of coming up with a team name or theme that fits within that theme. Okay, and then like some sort of like color representation for that team, so that like, you know, week 1 you could come dressed on theme, but you shouldn't go buy 4 outfits that fit your theme. Maybe just wear a blue shirt and your team is the blue team. Does that make sense? And you'll get points for those blue teams. So MSM games taking place first 4 weeks of July. Then the first week of August we'll have our awards ceremony, where the winning team will be awarded a trophy, and it will be a real trophy, and we will do some sort of engraving of that team name onto the trophy, and that trophy will be passed on year to year to the new winning team for that summer. Each week of July will be a different category of game. So each night will be themed differently, and it'll focus on a different category of competitions that are played. Your objective is to score the most points as a team, and each game or competition will have points available for first place, second place, third place, fourth place. If you bring friends, it will be extra points to your team for 2 weeks. So if you bring, I would love if your friends keep coming, but after 2 weeks, they're like part of our group. And so they don't count as your friends anymore. Now they're my friend. Yeah. Okay, so they will get points for those first 2 weeks. You'll get points as a team if you can wear your themed color consistently through whichever team has the most people wearing that color, whatever it be. I'm not going to be like, if your team is the white team, you don't have to be wearing an entirely white like undershirt. If it has like a good amount of white, that's fine. Who cares? We're not going to be, the point is for us to have fun, not necessarily for us to be like super sticklers. So points for doing things well and like being good sportsmen, having good sportsmanship. And then on the reverse side, if you're a big jerk and all you do is whine and cry every time your team loses because they suck at the game, I will take points away from you. Okay, cool. Yeah, you don't get to ask them yet. We will keep a running score and calculate winners week by week, right? So I haven't decided if I'm going to tell you like exactly who's in charge or what, or who's in the lead. Probably you'll have a good idea of who's winning. So that being said, that's MSM Games. We will explain these rules. You don't have to memorize everything right now. We need to talk about our first year 1 theme. In September.
Woo! I'm excited.
Yeah. In September, Carolyn and I were gone for a long time, and the youth leaders ran things, and you guys ran things, and I don't know what happened. But I think there was a week where maybe Ethan and Devin were in charge of games, and Ethan came up in front of everybody. And Ethan, I don't know if it's a joke, I don't know if it's a reference, but Ethan came forward and he said, "Ahoy!" Ahoy! And everybody responded. And so, year 1 MSM Games is the high seas. Thank you, Ethan. That means that your team will need to come up with some sort of team name or theme that fits into high seas. Maybe you're pirates. Maybe you're tourists on a cruise ship. Maybe you're dolphins. I don't know if you want to be. Maybe you're like, what's the show? Tsunami, hurricane, sharks. Maybe you're the team of that show that's on Discovery Channel about dudes with long beards that are kind of grungy and they go out in the sea and they like catch fish and it's storming all the time. I don't know. You could be that team if you wanted to. You will have to come up with some idea. You can be creative within this. You can be sea monsters. You can be seahorses. I don't care what you are. Something with the high seas.
Mermaids.
Oh, sure, mermaids. Now, on the first week of MSM games, the hope is that your team comes like somewhat dressed and themed as your team. So, if you were the pirates, right, you would come dressed up as pirates. Now, the same thing with senior night. Like, I am not asking you to go buy expensive pirate memorabilia and wear it to youth group. Yeah, just borrow Ethan's pirate gear. Like maybe it's a black piece of construction paper with a little string tied around it and you have an eye patch on, right? Like these are the sorts of things that I'm talking about. But come themed on that first night. And then after those 3 weeks that follow, you'll just wear a color code. So the color does not have to be on theme. Does not have to be a high seas theme. For instance, not everybody can be blue. So like a team is going to get blue and then another team can't also have blue. And you can't do like, but we're like a green blue, but we're like a blue green. That doesn't count. Okay, so like blue and then a black team and a green team and a red team, right? So like
Jumbo shrimp.
you can be the jumbo shrimp if you want. So even though those aren't like necessarily on theme colors for high seas, it's totally fine. So I think I have 2 slides left. Let's talk about the 4 weeks of the MSM games. Week 1 is going to be a water night. So you're going to come in your themed outfit and you're going to get wet. Okay, we're going to do a water night week 1. They will be competition based, so you will get points. But it's not all going to be like sports run around. Like each night we will have different ways for everybody to be involved and have fun. It's not going to be like constant running in the field and throwing things at each other's faces. That's not what it's going to be. Week 2 is like a Bible trivia night, right? So we'll probably go inside. We'll do a big trivia game. There'll be points. There'll be prizes, things like that. Week 3 is sports night. Maybe we play dodgeball. Maybe we play kickball. Maybe we play frisbee. We play a lot of, probably not going to play baseball, but we'll play different sports that night. Week 4 is based on my favorite show ever, and it's based on Survivor. So we're going to do a Survivor night. There will be obstacle courses. Nobody will die. Nobody will die. We will do a Survivor-themed night. So the hope is that like everything we do, like we'll be able to reach everybody. So I know not all of you love to play sports, love to be active, love to go do those things. We will have things each night that you can still have fun and participate in. Now I want to tell you your teams. There are some of you that may not see your name on these lists, but that doesn't mean that you can't come. Like, for instance, Max and Olivia, your names aren't on the list. But if you want to come, I'll just put your names on the list. I would love to have you here, okay? So we will fill those out. Like our incoming students, they aren't on here yet. Like our soon-to-be 7th graders, but they will be welcome to come join us. They will be added to the teams. So this is the first, well, it's not the first draft of teams, but it's the first draft that's being brought to you to see, okay? And so if you don't see your name, don't be freaked out. We'll get you on there. We'll get you sorted out. So on to our teams. They're pretty small, but that's okay. You can come take a picture after, and we will send this to you. Team 1 is if she chooses to come. Ellie, Ben, Lucy, Maxon, Abby, and Caleb. Team 2 is Andrew, Colton, Devin, Tommy, Daniel, Julia, and Victorious. Team 3 is Lucas, Ethan, Carter, Jeremiah, Maya, and Anna. And then Team 4 is Gracie, Josie, Stratton, Clay, JT, and Chloe. So, as the summer goes on, there are going to be teams like, for instance, you'll see that this team is bigger than the rest of the teams, okay? If everybody shows up, that just means on each competition, this team will sit one person. Nobody can sit twice. So nobody is going to get sat out multiple times. You have to choose a different person for each game, okay? And as you come, we'll have people like Will. We'll have leaders that can step in and fill in games as well. And so we'll help fill out those teams. Okay, so that's,
My last name's not Beal.
my bad. So that's what I have now. And so now I can take questions. Max, I think you have like 15 or 16 questions. That's my preference, honestly. I saw Andrew and then Maya.
So for coming in, is it like just these games, or is there going to be like a Bible lesson?
There will be a Bible lesson as well. It'll just be like, where instead of 40 minutes like I took tonight, it'll be 20, 15, 20. Yeah, but still Bible, yeah, definitely. We'll still have a Bible study with it for sure.
So also, I'm going to miss that first week because
Yeah.
I'm on vacation. Would that like count as
Nope.
sitting out?
What do you mean?
Like, because you said since my team has extra, we may need to have some person sit out one day. Like, would me not being there for vacation count as me sitting out?
No, I don't think so. But like, you're not gonna get penalized. Like, I think, just so you know, let me communicate. Like, you guys are gonna have vacations and go on trips. Just go. Like, it's okay to miss a week of youth group. I feel like some people are like, I have to be there every week. It's okay to miss one. You're good. You can just miss. So.
But only in the summer.
Oh yeah. When fall starts, if you're not here, I'm marking it down. Maya.
Are we assigned like colors?
No, your team will be able to choose your color, but
Unless everyone chooses blue.
correct, and then I will assign them. So basically, the first team that comes up with their theme and then comes and says, "Hey, we want this," whatever their color is, I'll give them their color.
First and a second option.
Yeah, I would pick a couple, like first priority, second priority. Yes, Maxon.
If I invite a friend,
Yeah.
that friend
Yes.
vandalizes something, will I get in trouble for it?
His friends are
Because all my
friends
friends
are
are
crazy.
It's just
Yeah.
Like, it's just like at your house when you have a friend over. If your friend breaks something, you're in trouble too.
Okay, well, my friends are bad.
Rule of thumb. Yeah, I would just, I would come.
So just like have your mom have a talk with him.
Tell them that they can vandalize the other teams by beating them in competition. Yeah.
If we invite friends, do they get to be on our team?
Oh, yeah. If you invite friends, they'll be on your team. Yep. Unless you invite like 12 and they all show up. Then I may have to spread them out some. I mean, if you invite 12, I will put all of those points towards you. They will just, your team will get the points for your friends, but I can't put like 6 friends on your team. Like, it's just, the teams are so out of whack at that point. Yeah.
Does that mean I'm like team captain since I'm kind of at the
No.
top?
Nope. You're at the top because I did seniors first, and then like things start to get out of whack because I sent a first draft out, and then a second draft, and then a third draft, and then a fourth draft, and then we came up with this list. And so then,
Leaders work so hard to try to make a team balance.
yeah, I want you guys to have fun. Like I want it to be good. So, okay, are there any other questions about the MSM games? Okay, so to recap, we will be meeting in July and August this year. We'll still take the rest of May off. We'll meet the first week of June for senior night. We'll take the rest of June off, but we'll have super summer and things like that. And then starting on that first week, that first Sunday in July, we'll start meeting again. And if this goes well, then each year after this, we'll have this expanded calendar. And so, Yeah, I'll send out to you, or maybe I'll bring next week, and I'll do both. Sign up to church like in the morning, like sign-ups for kid camps. Huh? Yes.
Yes, next Sunday's Mother's Day.
So, yeah, so that's the big announcement. This adds 8 weeks to our calendar each year, sometimes even up to 9. So I don't know, I like hanging out with you guys. I'm kind of bummed that we don't do like more youth group. And so this is my hope to give us more momentum, like give you more. I know that it can be like tough to bring a friend and them have to like sit in here and listen to me lecture for 35, 40 minutes. I know that's like, for most people, they're like, okay, that was a lot. And so this is like my hope to like give us opportunity to bring them in and let them get to know people before we jump into that. But then like after this, parent kickoff will start in August. And we will start Matthew on the 25th. So, okay. I am going to pray. It's 7:10. You can hang out, play games.
Get your character.
Yes, please go see. Before you play games, go get your character from Carolyn.
And it is a suggestion.
Sit down, Clay. I have to pray still.
It's a suggestion.
And then you can hang out, play 9 Square, play Octoball. Before you leave, please help us tear this down, and please help us take down 9 Square. If you leave it up, it means I have to take it down by myself. And I just learned on Saturday night or Friday night that it'll take me like 25 minutes to do it by myself because I have 2 hands. And it was raining and I got really wet. So let me pray, and then you can just hang out after you get your stuff from Carolyn.